Chapter 51. See now, beggar, you are listening at novelfull.audio. The spy dragon landed upon a protrusion on the city wall, gazing at the backs of Regriel and General Artica, watching them walk forth. Compass Carburetor made a mental count of their speed, calculating the time it would take them to cross the stretch of a kilometer and head into the forest beyond. He then mentally kept a tally of the time while the spy dragon awaited in place, remaining as obscure as possible. After giving another 10 seconds of clearance time for any errors, the spy dragon began to fly once the estimated time for Regriel to cross the kilometer stretch spanned. It made a beeline, remaining close to the ground so that it could assume its serpentine form the moment it encountered anything dangerous and hide behind any object or even dig into the dirt to hide within. Thankfully, nothing eventful happened as the spy dragon soon reached the thicket of trees, assuming its serpentine form as it began to slither over the tree roots, soon watching Regriel and General Artica come into view. They seemed to be conversing, discussing about the matter at hand. But suddenly, Regriel took in a deep breath, gazing at the lush green surroundings as he looked at General Artica, say, "Isn't this a wonderful location?" General Artica frowned, looking around as she noticed the place filled with vitality, looking forth to see the place further be covered by snow. She soon noted that the cause had been the rocks strewn at the place. They seemed to be capable of absorbing heat at a greater rate and hence caused the snow in the place to melt faster, creating such a lush green atmosphere. Moreover, the humidity, the greenery, and the faint water flowing over the rocks created a picturesque scene in the otherwise white jungle. "This is a wonderful loca," General Artica just began to speak in appreciation when a pair of hands landed on her chest, causing her to flinch in shock as she looked behind in surprise. "What are you doing?" "I just can't control myself when I see you," Regriel whispered with a face flushed red as he kneaded her heels. "Let's do it here, just once." "We already did it more than 5 times in the morning," General Artica groaned. "We'll waste a lot of time if we stop to do it now." "It's fine, we can run after this," Regriel said, joining with her as he experienced the euphoria once again, shouting in his mind, "General Artica is the best." Compass Carburetor facepalmed, watching the scene that was worse than beasts mating. He sighed, gazing at the faint snow that was falling upon him, beginning to cover his body, sighing, "When she is cured, PTSD would be the least of worries. Maybe it might be better to never free her from Regriel's control. At least that way, she wouldn't have to face her choices and live a life plagued by her actions conducted when she was under his control." Compass Carburetor sighed, "This is troubling. Hopefully, the Queen has prepared something to ease General Artica's mind once she is freed." Compass Carburetor then watched the duo of Regriel and General Artica continue to march forward, soon breaking into a sprint to save some time. Now that they were approaching his location, Compass Carburetor focused, calming his beating heart as he began to moan in pain, "Ayo. This world is, cruel." He flailed his arms, throwing around balls of snow that he had scooped around. Immediately, he began to cry, watching General Artica come into view, beginning to roll around on the path. "Wah! You imperialistic jerks! How could you do this to me?" Regriel and General Artica abruptly stopped, watching the beggar wail around before them. They made eye contact with each other, intending to ignore the beggar and swerve around him when the beggar's wails increased in pitch. "I was, a renowned soldier once, but that blaster general, he betrayed, causing everyone under him to be thrown aside like rotten fish, ah." Even though everything the beggar said only seemed to be like the rambling of a senile fool, General Artica felt conflicted all of a sudden, slowly approaching him as she looked at him, asking, "What happened?" But, it seemed like the beggar hadn't heard her, continuing to scream in his drunken stupor. But, upon hearing his words, even though she wished to leave the place, her body paused automatically, her attention trained to what he wished to say next. Suddenly, as if the beggar had noticed the people next to him, he latched onto General Artica's legs. "Lady, I was a man of honor, a soldier who had been glad to lay down his life for the Empire. But, he then let go of his hold, crying as he began to search for his liquor bottle, slamming the ground in anger upon noticing that its contents had all spilt out. He then looked at General Artica. "Give me liquor." Just as he tried to get up, the beggar collapsed, unable to walk as his legs seemed to have been severely wounded. He crawled on the ground, pointing towards a particular direction. "Please, my liquor, I saved a couple of bottles there." Upon seeing some conflict in General Artica, and noticing her intention to at least help the beggar a bit, Re-Griel patted her shoulder. "Relax, just stay here. I'll be back in a jiffy. It's pretty near from here." "But, it's dangerous." General Artica expressed her worry when Re-Griel placed a finger on her lips, motioning for her to remain silent. Flashing a smile, he spoke. "Nothing will happen to me. You've seen how strong I've become, right? Even if something happens, I'll be able to protect myself long until you rush to my rescue." Saying his piece, Re-Griel began to run through the path. Just as General Artica was about to follow him instinctually, the beggar latched onto her feet, causing her to pause. In the time she hesitated, Re-Griel was out of her sight. Sighing, she looked at the beggar. All right, I'll bring your liquor. Now, stay put." The beggar immediately placed his index finger above his lips like a kid, acting obedient as he sat in place, innocently trailing his gaze over General Artica as she walked in the pointed direction and noticed a stash of bottles buried under a tree. Chapter 52. CC's Trap. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Bless my luck, I didn't wish for General Artica to see this. She wouldn't stop worrying about it. Re-Griel laughed as he sprinted through the forest, feeling the wind bristling past his face as he ran. Being able to run like the wind is amazing. Why did I never think of it before? And thanks to my 100 Darlak, I can run for a considerably long distance without feeling even the least bit tired. Smiling along the way, Re-Griel hopped from one uneven foothold to another, running through the flatter forest path, watching his footsteps on the snow trailing behind him. Within 10 minutes, he reached a forest clearing, noticing a rather humble mansion come into view. It was made from stone and hence remained standing firm even though it seemed to be a century old. The signs of an obvious lack of maintenance were present everywhere as numerous vines grew over the walls of the estate. Re-Griel noticed that the gates were locked, with the key not with him. Though, it didn't matter as he approached the wall, grabbed hold of the vines growing on it, and yanked, climbing over. Once he reached the top, he descended to the other side similarly, landing within the estate grounds. The grass was thick in the place, peeking through the snow as they reached his knee. Re-Griel was slightly cautious, unwilling to step atop anything that might be sleeping within the grass. He was beaten up almost daily on numerous occasions as General Artica instilled in him a sense of caution. Even though his rashness caused him to screw up time and again, he still tried to be cautious. And, upon slowly inching forward through the grass while first gently poking around with the top of his shoe to see whether anything was sleeping, Re-Griel slowly lost his patience. And, upon doing the same for 10 steps, he sighed, "I guess there is nothing here." Thinking as he sighed in relief, he casually began to walk, soon sensing something amiss after walking a couple of steps as he set foot on the ground, noticing that it sunk into the snow only half as much as before. And, the contact surface seemed to be slightly, rubbery. "Sheet!" Re-Griel shouted in alarm as he jumped back, noticing something in the ground spring up as the snow was brushed aside like a rope placed within had been yanked out forcefully. Quickly coiling around itself was a serpent, one that was 3 meters long, having a thin body as it slithered around, using the snow-covered, grass-filled ground to camouflage itself while it headed towards Re-Griel. Damn it! Re-Griel flinched as he pulled out his armament, activating the long sword as he slashed on the ground a couple of times, hitting anywhere the snake might have gone over. But, all he noticed were the grass getting cut up and the snow being sent flying. The snake wasn't injured. And, as he flailed around in such a manner, his long sword got stuck in the ground as he had lodged it in quite deep. At the moment when he was trying to pull it out, the snake sprang out of the grass, biting him in the thigh. Kayak! Re-Griel screamed in a fluster, only now realizing that he could simply deactivate his armament instead of trying to pull the long sword out. He deactivated it, activated the sword, and slashed at the snake, severing it into two. But its teeth were firmly lodged in his body as he hurriedly pulled it out, throwing it in a fluster. That was scary. System, activate inferior healing. He bellowed in his mind. Immediately, a faint white light enveloped his thigh, causing the poisoned blood to gush out of his wound. It then began to slowly heal up as he muttered, "Damn, that cost me 6 Darlak. Just how potent was this poison? Had I been a normal human, this would have killed me." He expressed his worry, heaving a sigh of relief once his injury finished healing. Now, on to the real reason. He pulled out the scroll he had brought with him, opening it partially to reveal a tiny map of the estate. And on it was marked a rather bold X sign. Locating it based on the structure of the estate layout, Rigriel soon arrived at the backyard of the mansion, noticing an enclosed altar in the place. The altar resembled a miniature steeple, sporting an open section in the front that spanned a height of 30 centimeters. The space inside was only enough for a person to place his hand. After looking at the map and double-checking it, Rigriel arrived before the altar, looking into its interior, soon noticing some grooves around the edges. Using a thin piece of metal he had brought over for this, Rigriel inserted it into the groove, tilting it as the floor within the altar moved up. Soon, he removed it, noticing another floor underneath. So, this is the false altar flooring that was mentioned in the scroll. Right, this is enough to fool the average trespasser. Thankfully for me, I have the scroll. Rigriel noticed 2 impressions on the floor, resembling a palm each, the left and right. There were faint needles on the impression, less than a couple of millimeters tall each. Upon seeing it, Rigriel's heart began to thump automatically as he asked in his mind, "System, can you really change my blood imprint to resemble Kaluto's?" Ding. Temporarily for a minute, yes. But, if it takes longer, then it would fail. Hopefully, it doesn't take that much time. Rigriel thought, looking at the instructions as he read them aloud. Place your palms over the impressions. Once the impressions are full of the successor's blood, the mechanism activates, and the key is handed out. Rigriel took in a deep breath and placed his palms on the impressions, firming himself before pressing them down viciously, shrieking in pain as the needles pierced into his palms, drawing out blood profusely. Rigriel watched his blood fill up the impression with anticipation, expecting the key to be handed out when his Darlak was sucked in a bit. And, from the outer edge of the altar formed an energy blade, severing both his hands. Chapter 53. Domino Platopia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ah! My hands! Rigriel screamed in pain as his hands were cut off. Blood spurted out, splashing on the altar as he rolled on the snow, flailing around as he began to cry in pain. Suddenly, his pain began to subside as a white glow activated on his hands, causing him to slowly come to a stop as he noticed his hands regenerating. His Darlak was consumed tremendously as his severed hands continued to regrow. But, he noticed that he didn't have enough Darlak to fully grow both the hands. Thinking clearly now that his pain vanished, "System, heal my right hand first. Use the remaining Darlak on my left hand." Rigriel saw his right hand being healed first. And when it was done, he barely had 10 Darlak remaining, focusing it on his left hand as he heaved a sigh in relief, stopping the blood flow. "If I didn't have a system, I would have had to live as a cripple from today onwards." Thankfully, only now did he notice that the energy blade within the altar had vanished. As for the floor with the palm impressions, they seemed to have changed too. Now, there was a flat floor within the altar. And, situated on it was an armament. Rigriel extended his hand, flinching once as he recalled the pain, afraid to insert his hand into it, lest it got severed once again. But, curiosity got the better of him as he wanted to see the armament that had appeared in the altar. But he was smarter this time, inserting his left hand into the altar. After all, it wasn't fully healed. So, even if it got injured again, he wouldn't be too much affected. Regreel gently nudged the armament, taking it out after some effort. The moment he brought it out of the altar, he grabbed hold of it using his right, noticing that it only had one state. After a moment of thought, he activated it, noticing an energy blade had formed. But, this was in the shape of a key, a rather large one at that, spanning a length of 30 centimeters. Upon seeing it, Regreel was stumped for a moment before he began to laugh. Right, I had assumed it was a normal dot-looking key. But, this is an armament that condenses the energy blade in the form of a key. This changes everything, He then frowned, noticing some obvious signs of tampering in the altar, recalling everything Kaluto had said, so, since Grister died without saying anything, it means he didn't have the intention of conveying the truth to Kaluto. But, Parlet was the one that had revealed the truth to them. Maybe, after anticipating that someone might steal this key, he changed the armament in the altar to automatically sever the hands of whoever tried to activate it. Before, the trap would activate only when someone that didn't have the bloodline of the Great Megwest Empire tried to activate the altar. Regreel contemplated, sighing, thankfully, I have a healing ability. Otherwise, I dare not. He suddenly paused, noticing a tiny chit of rolled paper attached to the armament. He removed it, opening it to read the words written on it, don't even think about it. Whoever you are, it's impossible for you. Ha, I'm not your average Joe. I can handle a level 5 dungeon. Regreel snorted in disdain, rolling up the paper as he pocketed it just in case, getting up as he ensured the armament with the key was safely tucked in his dress. He then made his way out, struggling in the process to do so since his left hand was missing. Thank you, brave lady. May you be blessed with luck and fortune. The beggar wheezed a bit before he leaned on a tree, waving his hand at General Artica as he fiddled around with his liquor bottle. It was a rather large tree with a thick trunk, so he positioned himself comfortably, even going to the extent of using the tree roots as an armrest. He then looked at General Artica, no matter what, don't doubt yourself. Doubts leads to suspicion, and suspicion leads to rash actions. They eventually cause you endless grief. So, be confident. The beggar suddenly hiccuped, burping a little as he seemed to be fully drunk, laughing without reason. He was senile. What are you? Just when General Artica was about to inquire further, she noticed Regreel return, hopping around, as usual, clearly happy judging based on his body language. He then noticed the beggar seated before the tree, laughing like an idiot, ignoring him as he arrived before General Artica. I got the item. Right as he was about to habitually hug General Artica, his foot hit a liquor bottle, looking at it in reflex to see that it was an empty bottle. But, something seemed to be inside the bottle, a piece of paper. What is this? What happened to your hand? Right as Regreel was about to pick up the bottle, General Artica shouted in alarm as she lifted his left hand, asking in a hurry, what happened? How did you lose it? Relax, it will heal back soon enough. Regreel smiled casually, picking up the bottle as he showed it to her. Anyway, there seems to be something inside it. Let's take a look. He didn't even seem to care about the beggar, breaking the bottle on a rock nearby, taking out the paper from within as he read the contents aloud. When you reach Mohart Dungeon, think of me, and call out my name. The secret society would help you. Domino Platopia. Upon reading the name of the person who had written the sentence, Regreel swerved his head to his left, gazing at the beggar that had been leaning on the tree trunk. Only, the beggar seemed to have vanished now. Regreel hurriedly looked around, unable to find the beggar, asking General Artica, did you see where he went? No, he was here just a moment ago. General Artica too was confused as she looked around, unable to find any traces of the beggar around her, not even any footstep trails. It was as if the beggar had vanished into thin air. The secret society, huh? How mysterious, Regreel muttered, clenching the piece of paper tightly. Domino Platopia, I'll remember your name. Chapter 54. Batman's Disappearing Act. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. As Rigriel and General Artica began to walk away, the spy dragon coiled around a branch, gazing at their retreating figures, stealthily following them. Once they had traversed by more than 100 meters, forking away through the thicket of trees, the beggar exited from behind the tree with the large trunk. Patting his chest to calm his thumping heart, Compass Carburetor clenched his hand into a fist, raising it high up into the air. Success. Rigriel's system was unable to sense anything suspicious about me. He was assured of the fact thanks to the way Rigriel had thought about him. After all, the moment Rigriel thought about him, a mental energy stream landed on him, allowing him to determine the emotions Rigriel felt at the time. And through a detailed observation of the variations of states of the mental energy streams directed at him by Rigriel, Compass Carburetor was finally assured that by blocking his mental energy form using the nerves was a great measure against the system's probing senses. And, that wasn't all, Compass Carburetor went a step further to only talk to General Artica. This way, even when a mental energy stream didn't land on Rigriel from him, the system wouldn't feel anything was amiss. After all, from the start, he was only focused on General Artica, not even glancing at Rigriel once. So, it wasn't suspicious. One of my wishes was finally realized today, Compass Carburetor sighed, grinning widely as he gazed at the sky. I wanted to pull a Batman's vanishing act on people at least once. And I can say this was a resounding success. It wasn't anything too impressive, just a sleight of the hand typically used by all the magicians on Earth to distract the focus of the audience in one direction while they prepared the next trick from the other. The first part of his Batman's vanishing act was the liquor bottle placed in the center of the path. Compass Carburetor had accurately placed himself before the tree, having grasped the comfort distance of General Artica around him. By calculating that during the first time he hugged her legs, he backed away, planting the liquor bottle with the piece of paper in the center of the path, positioned horizontally to his right. Moreover, he had also placed a small rock on the right end of the path, positioning it slightly beyond arm's reach from the bottle's position. This way, when Rigriel noticed it, he was distracted by the paper inside the liquor bottle. And his thought process immediately went towards the intention to see what was written in it. Moreover, he also wished to divert General Artica's focus from his lacking left hand. So, it worked perfectly for him as Rigriel picked up the bottle with his right hand and looked at the rock on his right. He smashed the bottle on the rock and looked into the paper. General Artica only focused on him once he returned. So, they had turned their backs towards Compass Carburetor. As for his schemes, he behaved like a wisecrack that had gone senile, spouting wise words filled with random bullsh*t, purely keeping General Artica's attention on his words. That's how she failed to notice the bottle planted in the center of the path. Otherwise, considering how attentive she was usually, she would have noticed it first thing. Compass Carburetor constantly led her on through his words, confusing her at times while also causing her to ponder during the rest, fully grasping her attention to himself. Finally, the scene played out once Rigriel arrived. And, once their backs faced his way, Compass Carburetor carefully took a step around the tree, ensuring to place his foot on the protruding tree root to do so, heading towards the side of the tree that blocked their line of sight. That was why he had chosen such a large, trunked tree in the first place. He carefully stood in place, pulling a root that also acted as a lever, causing the tree roots to slightly slide away as he slipped through the gap like a snake, closing the roots back to their original position. As it was snowing, even the faintest disturbance in the snow was blanked by the falling snow within a couple of seconds. Moreover, as Rigriel and General Artica hadn't seen the back of the large trunked tree, they were unable to notice the slight differences in the area. The whole was something he had already prepared in advance. That's why he awaited in such a place. He also had 3 spy dragons in total. The first was the one that tailed after General Artica from the city. The second was planted in the mansion, gazing at the altar from a clear angle to see whether Rigriel's hands were severed or not. As for the third spy dragon, it was placed far away on the edge of the forest, overlooking the path that one had to take to head towards the capital of the Heroica Empire, Grenston. Now that Regriel and General Artica had gone far enough, Compass Carburetor exited the hole, returning the tree roots to their original position, unwilling to leave behind any traces. He then sprinted towards the mansion, ensuring to only step upon the footsteps made by Regriel. It was wise to be cautious. So, he dared not slip up in the slightest. Nor was he willing to take things lightly for even a moment. Compass Carburetor raced towards the mansion, leaping once he approached it, landing atop the walls like a cat before jumping into the estate ground. Upon noticing that no new mental energy stream fell on him from the estate ground, he was assured that no other snake or the variety was at the place. He quickly arrived before the altar, flipping the mechanism within as he pulled out a sealed box. And, within it were the two hands of Regriel. Upon seeing them, Compass Carburetor contained his revulsion, observing it as he could see a transparent substance trying to exit it and scatter. This is the fragment of Regriel's system contained in his hands. I wonder how I should refine it. Chapter 55. Two system fragments. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Now, how would I refine these into system fragments? Compass Carburetor frowned, not having many leads in this department. He then thought of the way he created his personal fragment and the method through which he refined foreign mental energy into his. He took out Anthozoa, his personal fragment, and placed it above Regriel's left arm, gently touching it as he noticed the part of the system in his arms beginning to slowly escape into the air. He positioned the gun's nozzle accordingly, watching the stream of transparent substance, exiting the left arm, seep into his gun's nozzle. Suddenly, the gun whirred into life as Compass Carburetor felt a sharp drain in the mental energy saved up in his mental energy form. The transparent substance was sucked into the gun within a couple of seconds, causing Regriel's left hand to crumble into dust before it too was absorbed into the gun. It was as if his hand hadn't existed there in the first place. Compass Carburetor then did the same to Regriel's right hand, watching it too get sucked into his gun similarly. He then experienced sharp pain in his head as his mental energy was getting sucked erratically, causing him to feel light-headedness as his brain whirred non-stop, generating as much mental energy as possible. All the mental energy he had stored was being sucked into his gun as it began to interact with the part of Regriel's system he had absorbed. He could hear numerous screams in his mind, noticing the figure of Regriel's system appear all of a sudden. It looked no different to the one he had seen in the system world. At present it was struggling, wailing as it was attacked by a hail of bullets. And, when he looked at the source, he was shocked, for it was the Earth shooting the bullets at Regriel's system. As he watched the battle between the two entities take place in his mind, Forth's words resounded in him, allowing him to understand just what was happening. Right, I was born on Earth. So, I'm part of it, affected by the laws existing on Earth. So, when I refined the money-making system's body, I was using the laws of the Earth to attack and damage the laws that made up the money-making system. Since the laws of Earth were superior, I ended up as a victor. He then nodded in realization. So, if I try to refine a system whose laws surpass those that make up Earth, then I would lose. Wait, this is the functional makeup of a world we are talking about. Surely, they can't be that weak, right? He then recalled how no system slayer had killed a grade 2 system. Grade 2 systems fall into the magical limit. So, are they superior to the laws governing Earth? I can only find out in the future. He sighed, watching the battle in his mind reach the climax. The Earth bombarded Regriel's system with a torrent of bullets, riddling it with holes to the extent it was unable to move anymore, finally losing its sense of being. Numerous chains then appeared from Earth, wrapping around the defeated system as a mysterious energy was channeled into it, molding it like dough. A couple of hours later, 2 bullets were what remained of the process. Compass Carburetor noticed that the bullets resembled what Anthozoa fired, rectangular in shape. The 2 bullets each seemed to be having their respective properties. The moment he focused on the first, a vast surge of information streamed into his mind, allowing him to learn everything about the system fragment. Body Resurgence, Level 2. It allows me to combust all the fat in my body to condense Darlac. This permanently increases my Darlac reserve by a large amount. I see, so this is what he relied upon to burn all his fat and increase his Darlac reserve shortly. He nodded, smiling. Compass Carburetor then focused on the second system fragment, absorbing the memory influx, understanding everything there was to know about it, nodding, Slave Harem, Level 1. This allows me to enslave a woman. But, since this is only a system fragment, its effect doesn't last long. And the duration of the effect varies based on the willpower of the target. So, this is Rigreel's system, huh? The Slave Harem system, Compass Carburetor snorted, quite the disgusting ring it has. He then pulled up his stats, looking at the changes in it. Name. Compass Carburetor, Race. Human, Physique. Health, Level 10, Strength, Level 10, Dexterity, Level 8, Stamina, Level 7, Intelligence, Level 7, Cognition, Level 9, Natural Recovery, Level 6, 5 Senses, Level 10, Resting, Level 10, Personal Fragment. Anthozoa, Arms. 2 Arms. Body Resurgence, Level 2, Save Harem, Level 1. This has been a fruitful harvest. Compass Carburetor stretched his hand, relaxing a bit as he closed his eyes, noticing that Rigreel and General Artica were already on their way towards Grenston. He then began to make his way towards Peckle City, returning to an inn they had booked. The two servants had already shifted their belongings to this place, beginning to pack everything carefully. The moment Compass Carburetor entered, he smiled, flashing a thumbs up. The first part of the plan is a success. Amazing. Fielta clapped while Kaithai continued to pack their belongings. Soon after, once everything was packed, she motioned for Compass Carburetor to be seated, beginning to remove his makeup. Once she had fully removed his makeup, she said, "Take a bath now, the smell is unbearable. Also, Her Majesty has issued us enough travel funds to reach the southern border of the Heroica Empire. Beyond that, we'll be on our own." "I'm prepared," Compass Carburetor nodded. "As to what my preparations are, I can't say to you. Like we had been commanded by the Queen, we won't pry into it." Kaithai said, forcefully pushing him into the bathroom, "Don't come out until all the stench has vanished. We'll delay our journey if need be." That won't be necessary." Compass Carburetor shut the door, exiting the bathroom after an hour, completely refreshed, wearing some normal clothes now. They then carried their luggage and exited the inn, heading towards a nearby stable to buy a horse carriage, boarding it as Compass Carburetor sighed, anticipating the journey, now, onwards to the battleground where I'll face a system head. On. Mohart Dungeon. Chapter 56. The Necessities to Kill a System. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It would take us around 2 months to reach the southern border of Heroica Empire. As to how long it would take to reach Mohart Dungeon, it can't be predicted since we would be roaming through a territory full of monsters. Compass Carburetor sighed, expressing mild worry. If possible, he wished to destroy Rigreel within a year. Beyond that, his growth might end up becoming beyond what he could handle. It wasn't just Rigreel's growth that he had to worry about. After all, had that been the case, then he could have simply summoned his gun and shot him in the head when he acted as a beggar. He was fast enough to do that. And, since General Artica wouldn't have been expecting such an action, his success was basically guaranteed. But, if it was possible to kill a system user in such a manner, he could have done that long ago. Rigreel's system, the Slave Harem system, absorbed mental energy through him. And with that, it would have bought certain abilities that it could use during the worst-case scenario. Maybe it had an ability to detach Rigreel's consciousness while it healed his shattered head before placing his consciousness back into it. There was also the possibility of Rigreel teleporting from the place when confronted with danger. If that happened, Compass Carburetor's identity would be exposed and he would lose the element of surprise. That would be the worst-case scenario. So, his goal was to make Rigreel's system consume as much of its mental energy reserves as possible. After all, even a system had to obey the law of conservation of energy. And here, that energy was mental energy. The moment he obtained the two system fragments, Compass Carburetor had understood the importance of mental energy. To activate them, mental energy was necessary. Regreel had the energy of Darlak to use any abilities he obtained from the slave harem system. And once that was expended, he was helpless. But, that didn't mean his life would be in trouble. His system was capable of pulling unforeseen stunts to protect his life. And, the simplest of such a case was to teleport him out of danger and plunge him onto the lap of a rather powerful woman. With that, he would be able to form a connection with her through numerous coincidences of the sort. As the system would pick a target to suit such a scenario, it was a definite possibility. As every system was able to purchase abilities through its trading network, it would have obtained some abilities to ascertain this. That might also be the case in which it made Regreel form a connection with Cariel first, having determined the secrets she held. So, Compass Carburetor had to be careful in his plans, and only make a move when he was assured Regreel's system had completely expended its mental energy reserves. Before that, even if he were to kill Regreel, it wouldn't be an actual death since his system would be able to pull off something to save its host. But, this journey would take considerable duration. By the time Regreel completes the tournament and sets off towards Mohart Dungeon, it might take him at least 4.5 more months to reach there. And, that is in the case something unexpected doesn't happen. Compass Carburetor sighed, in the end, I have to rely on luck and first attain whatever the slave harem system had planned for Regreel to obtain in Mohart Dungeon. There was only a beaten path trailing from Peckle City to Grenston. The case was the same in the Entropica Kingdom too. The roads from one city to another weren't established and were only beaten paths that had formed after being frequented by travelers. After all, there was a reason they hadn't developed the roads. If the roads were developed, it would allow foreign kingdoms to use them to invade faster and bring in bigger siege weapons. It was the same as shooting themselves in the foot. So, no kingdom or empire developed any roads. Every city was built around a dungeon. So, all of them were self-sufficient to a certain extent. As for other necessities, they could be solved through trade to a certain extent. And for that, the beaten paths were enough. That's why, even the Heroica Empire hadn't developed any roads. Because of that, Compass Carburetor's journey to the southern tip of the Heroica Empire would span at least 2 months. He was a bit worried since this delay would allow more time for Regreel to grow. After all, what he had to shave off from Regreel was his Darlak reserves, the women under his control, and the mental energy in his system's possession. The longer the time spanned, the greater all three would develop. So, he didn't wish to delay things too much. But, he had no other choice but to be patient. After all, he was up against a system, a plot armor capable of mysterious feats. His only advantage was his possession of a gun whose bullets would damage a system. That was all. So, he had to be as careful as possible and plan as detailed as he could. Still, there should be a treasure in Mohart Dungeon, the secret that was created by the great Megwest Empire. Since Regreel's system is also aiming for it, it means there is enough credibility in it. And, it should be overpowered enough for a system to place importance upon. Once I obtain it, my advantages should increase, especially if it is what I think it is. He thought, sighing in worry. He then closed his eyes, meditating as he focused on his mental energy form, double-checking to ensure it was completely closed up. He didn't wish for any of his thoughts to generate mental energy streams. After all, the targets of all of them were Regreel. So, once it leaked, the slave harem system would be alerted of his plans. Now, my priority is to level up these two skills first. Compass Carburetor thought, focusing on the book representing his cognition, level 9, and the jar representing his natural recovery, level 6, in his mental energy form. I should bring them both to level 10 before I reach Mohart Dungeon. He thought, sighing, for that, I need to garner attention from as many people as possible. He sighed in worry, massaging his forehead. I didn't wish to do this. I was already fed up with it on Earth. But, guess I don't have a choice in the matter. I have to cause drama everywhere. Chapter 57. An actor. Yes, I am. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. It was late during the night as a horse-driven carriage sped through a beaten path, surrounded by a thicket of trees on both sides. The night was chilly, spooky even as the sounds of numerous monsters buzzed around at times, occasionally loud to the extent they rattled the bones of any passer-by. Seated within the carriage were 3 people. 2 of them were sleeping now while the third one was awake. It was Compass Carburetor and the 2 servants. He looked at the sleeping faces of the 2 servants, smiling subtly as he gently patted their heads before shifting himself towards the front, peeking out as he exited the carriage and sat on the front, beside the driver. The driver was a middle-aged man with a balding head. And, apparent from his white side burns, it seemed his hair loss was entirely due to stress. Young man, why don't you rest within? Sitting in the cold isn't safe for a young lad like you. The driver said. It's fine, Compass Carburetor sighed, gazing upward as he spoke. People like me are denizens of the night. When the shadow grows deep, so does our fangs. You make a good joke there. The driver laughed awkwardly for a moment, mildly shuddering in fear as he looked at Compass Carburetor's visage from the side. A sleek, elegant face that was capable of pulsing the hearts of even men, handsomeness at the peak of masculinity, but suffused with a semblance of grace that gave him a dignified air. With the darkness of the night painted in the background, adding on to his mysterious words, Compass Carburetor appeared, handsomely terrifying. Gulp. The driver could feel the sounds of his heartbeat in his ears, noticing that his hands were now slick with sweat. He also felt that as he held onto the reins, his hands were mildly trembling. Fear. Before he realized, fear had comfortably settled within his mind, making the place its home. But, the fear didn't cause him to rashly react. Rather, it was a sort of chillness that numbed his body and mind, causing him to fail in even making a scene. I was just joking, Compass Carburetor laughed, patting the driver's back jovially, lightening the atmosphere. Sorry if I scared you, I just wanted to lighten the mood. Don't mind that, the driver stammered before he regained his bearing. You got me good, And to think I was advising you about the scariness of the night. You are braver than me. Of course, the night can never be my enemy. Compass Carburetor said, smiling as he looked at the lamp before him. It was what lighted their path forward, casting a beam onto the road before the horses. Only a small part of its light flickered on the coach, barely highlighting their faces, casting shadows onto most of their features. The driver felt like a boulder had been smashed onto his heart as he looked at Compass Carburetor. For some reason, he was getting the heebie-jeebies from the other party. Even though it was brushed off as a joke, the driver could feel that Compass Carburetor wasn't lying. Are you having troubles with your life? Compass Carburetor asked all of a sudden. It is rare for someone of your age to bald so much. And, a good patch of your remaining hair has even turned white. Is there something troubling you? I may not look like it, but I'm a great consultant. A consultant? What's that? The driver was confused, feeling his heart rate slow down over time as they engaged in a normal conversation. Well, just consider me as someone who hears the troubles of people and offers them advice to be rid of them. Compass Carburetor smiled, noticing some really large trees span past, also spotting occasional gems that glistened under the night, silently staring at them as they sped past. Of course, I don't do it for free. I charge a hefty sum for every consultation. Compass Carburetor lightly waved his hand, saying in a carefree tone, but, since I am bored, I'll do it free for you. Thank you. The driver hesitated for quite the time before speaking after a sigh. I'm just a lowly driver. I had worked for a decade before saving up enough money to buy a caravan. I had hoped to become a merchant and give a better life for my family. But, he sighed, I didn't have a knack for it. I bought goods that didn't have much value at the destination city and also chose a time when the demand for them was the least. Once I repeated the same thrice, I no longer had enough money to be a merchant anymore and have to sell off my caravan to pay my debts. After that, I have been struggling to make ends meet as a driver. I have to stay away from my family during the trips, and the returns aren't even that great once I feed the horses and do maintenance work on the carriage. He sighed, life's tough. And adding on to that, he expressed his sadness, as I was constantly away from Peckle City, my wife moved in with the lord that she worked as a maid for. She chose a life as a keep over being with me. At this point, he began to shed tears, emitting sobbing sounds as he cursed himself. I just wanted to give them a better life. What did I do wrong to deserve such humiliation? Compass Carburetor nodded upon hearing the sob story, seemingly in thought as he spoke. Is that why you became a bandit? What? The driver was startled to the extent he pulled on the reins, causing the carriage to come to a stop as he gazed at Compass Carburetor in horror. Sir, what are you saying? I've never been a bandit all my life. Oh really? Compass Carburetor laughed, chuckling cutely like an 8-year-old girl, but, aren't we already at the graveyard of travelers? Your comrades are even surrounding us pretty well. I must say, you are one damn good actor. Seeing the driver's face ashen in fear, Compass Carburetor smiled, pinching, I told you, right. When the shadow grows deep, so does our fangs. Chapter 58. A Death Spirit. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Compass Carburetor watched the figure of the driver tremble in fear while his face turned ashen. He patted the other party gently, saying, So, why did you become a bandit? The lives of everyone hinges on the truthfulness of your answer. That is, I mean, the driver stammered like a broken record as he soiled his pants. The expression of Compass Carburetor had remained the same from the start, like everything was in the palm of his hands. His demeanor and the way he had predicted everything caused the driver to feel like he had been trapped amid a horror scene, trembling as he shouted, What the hell are you? Me. Compass Carburetor smiled gently pointing his index finger towards a certain direction high up into one of the trees at the back. Guess. For a moment, the driver didn't know what had happened, staring agape as he heard a loud thud. Trembling, he slowly turned his head, noticing the mashed remains of a corpse on the ground, one belonging to the bandit group he was a part of. As a traveler, it was always his duty to cross-check the identities of the people he gave a lift to. And, if they proved to be wealthy and were traveling as a whole family, then it meant they were right for the picking. His job was to lead such people through this designated route that lay parallel to the actual route. And upon arriving here, the people would be killed by the bandits while all the loot would be harvested. They even had a team that handled the owner-less properties of the killed people back in Peckle City. They had a sizable organization running amongst them that handled such stuff. And, among the drivers that led the prey to the forest patch, he was one of them. Normally, if he determined the travelers were someone poor or someone they couldn't afford to touch, he would travel through the actual route, and the bandit group wouldn't harm them. But, as he was scared by Compass Carburetor, he had habitually guided the carriage through the bandit route. And, only after he saw the corpse of one of the bandit members mysteriously crash onto the ground did it ring a bell in him, causing him to realize what he had done. He had royally screwed up. Please, leave them alone, Great Spirit. The driver resorted to begging immediately, they haven't done anything wrong. So, in your eyes, Compass Carburetor looked at the driver, slightly hardening his gaze as his voice turned chilly, murder, pillaging, property forgery, etc. isn't considered wrong. Grotak, what the heck's wrong with you? Why aren't you giving any signals? A bandit walked out from the thicket of trees, frowning in anger as he glanced at Compass Carburetor, glaring at the driver in response, say something, damn it. They aren't a target. I drove here by mistake. Grotak, the driver shouted, this guy's, no L.N. right at this time, Compass Carburetor slowly pointed at the bandit, saying with a cheerful tone, "What about you, good sir? Do you wish to humor me the reason you became a bandit?" "Ha! What the heck are you saying?" The bandit cursed in response, shouting, "Seriously, what's wrong with you, Grotak?" He then shouted, "Everyone, come out and kill our targets." Right as he said that, Compass Carburetor smiled, retracting his hand slowly as the bandit steadily collapsed to the ground in response, his head now sporting a gaping hole. "Well, you should have answered my question properly." There was a fluster among the people hiding in the thicket of trees, alarmed at the situation. Upon seeing the numerous mental energy streams incident on him, Compass Carburetor raised his voice, "All 17 of you, come out. If you don't, you can forfeit heading out during the night for the rest of your lives. You'll be hunted until the last of you. I'll give you 3 seconds." Compass Carburetor pointed at a spot from where the mental energy stream expressing the greatest fear appeared. "If you don't come out by then, I'll be cursing everyone. Wait. 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 Don't kill me." The bandit that he had pointed towards came rushing out of his hiding spot, afraid he would die like the others. He had been watching the actions of Compass Carburetor from the start, now aware that everyone the other party pointed at ended up dying mysteriously. It wasn't a method using the energy blades. After all, the energy blades emitted enough light to glow brightly in the dark. So, if Compass Carburetor had used armaments, it would have been apparent. But now that 2 bandits had dropped dead mysteriously, all of them were stricken with fear. Moreover, when they noticed Grotak shuddering in fear all along, his pale face, and the statement he had shouted before, they realized that the one they were dealing with was a mysterious individual. They had chosen their target wrongly. And, since their numbers had been accurately expressed, they didn't wish to make things worse for themselves, silently exiting their hiding places as they lined up before Compass Carburetor. Had they been regular bandits, they wouldn't have done such a thing. They had a fair level of intelligence, a reason as to why they had survived for as long as they had done and even expanded their organization to infiltrate into the legal administration. They really did line up. Compass Carburetor was amused for a moment, thinking of what he had to do next. In Peckle City, when they were about to hail a driver to drive the carriage they had bought, he looked through the drivers' list in the association that provided them. Among them, as he sensed the mental energy streams they emitted, he probed their mental states, getting an inkling as to what type of person they were. And, upon seeing a bandit disguised as a driver, he connected the dots, easily understanding the scheme at place. It was pretty much a cliché by this point, so he didn't even have to think much. And, since he had decided to create drama to obtain as much mental energy as possible, he of course chose Grotak, the bandit driver. This way, he could give the bandit group a really good scare and cause them to fear him for the rest of their lives. It was the most efficient method to obtain a steady stream of mental energy for his needs. Chapter 59. A terrifying charlatan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Well, does anyone wish to explain why they became bandits? Compass Carburetor stared at the bandits, his expression unchanging from the start, as if he was taking a pleasant sip of a drink. But now that the bandits looked at his placid expression, one where the light from the lamp on the carriage flickered across, casting numerous shadowy indentations upon, they felt terrified. We had no other choice but to do this to survive. Compass Carburetor faced the man who seemed the most terrified of them all, causing the other party to scream as he kneeled on the ground, begging to avoid death. Was it necessary to kill the people? Compass Carburetor said, expressing mild anger in his tone, pointing at the bandit that seemed the least affected by everything, even seemed to be plotting a counterattack. All the bandits were petrified by fear as they watched another one of them collapse to the ground all of a sudden. No, they noticed Compass Carburetor point at the man, and at that moment, something seemed to have condensed in his hand, killing the bandit, appearing sinistrous, like the Reaper. We won't kill anymore. All of them shouted simultaneously, banging their heads on the ground. Well, I can't take your words seriously, can I? Compass Carburetor tilted his head, what's the proof that you'll not kill another passer-by once I leave? We swear on our lives to never do it. The bandits shouted. That's not enough, Compass Carburetor nodded, deciding their fate immediately, pointing his finger at every bandit, one after another, saying upon finishing the action, "All right, I've planted a curse in all your bodies. The moment you kill someone, the curse would activate and give you a gruesome death." He then threw a metallic object towards one of the bandits. "That's my token. Every day during dusk, I want you to pray while holding it. All you have to tell is that you haven't killed anyone. Everyone must do it. If even one of you fails to do it before night sets in, then all of you can forget about seeing the light of day ever again." He then said a simple piece, "I won't stop you from being bandits. You can still be bandits. But, I forbid you from harming the travelers and stealing more than a quarter of their wealth. Abide by it, and you'll even get a chance to receive my protection." Compass Carburetor patted the driver. "Well, what are you waiting for? Get moving. I still have a lot of work to do." He then flashed a sheepish smile. "Or, do all of you wish to spend an eternity without seeing the light of the day? Grotak, get moving. Quickly. We'll take care of the rest here. Don't delay, respected spirit here." Grotak could only nod meekly, causing the carriage to begin moving once again. As for Compass Carburetor, he noticed that Grotak was unable to concentrate driving as he was too afraid, patting him once before returning to the carriage. Fielta and Kaithai were long awake, having witnessed everything in silence. Even though they were tremendously shocked, realizing that Compass Carburetor had hidden himself deeply, they didn't question his methods or abilities. But, once he seated himself comfortably and dusted his clothes, Kaithai muttered, "You're one terrifying charlatan." Haha. Compass Carburetor closed his eyes, sensing the numerous streams of mental energy incident on him. The sources weren't the bandits alone, but also the monsters that had been lurking in the dark, intending to prey on them. With their exceptional senses, they had noticed the bandits dying mysteriously, becoming terrified of the individual that had done so. Hence, their thoughts turned into mental energy streams that gushed into him, causing him to laugh in joy internally. As for the thoughts about killing 3 bandits, he wasn't concerned. Had they been innocent, he would have been plagued by the action for the rest of his life. But, he had long since confirmed that they had killed numerous people. The density of killing intent they could express through their mental energy streams was all the proof he needed. So, he didn't wish to leave them scot-free. But, he also wasn't able to kill them all. After all, he only had 6 bullets in his gun. Once he ran out of bullets, his ruse would be exposed. That was why he created such an act, steadily building a rapport of fear with the driver first. Since he also wished to obtain a steady stream of mental energy, this plan was perfect. He was neither a hero nor a villain. He was just a regular man that wished to do whatever was in his power to obtain the means to save his daughter. His moral compass was only averse to the notion of hurting innocent people. As for the rest, he wasn't the least guilty. After all, had he such a trait in him, he couldn't have become a businessman in the first place, not to mention growing into the leader of the business world. Sure, everything related to that success could be attributed to the money-making system. But, he was the one that did everything. And, that experience had affected his mentality. Weighing the pros and cons of any action had become a habit deeply ingrained into his being. That was why he limited himself to killing 3 bandits, no more, no less. His goal was to strike fear into their depths. And, killing 3 was enough for that. Any more, and he would lose potential mental energy sources. Now that a dense stream of mental energy gushed into him, Compass Carburetor first increased the amount flowing through the numerous circuits in his mental energy form before directing them towards the jar representing his skill of natural recovery, level 6, noticing the 7th segment in it be steadily filled up. At this pace, I only need 3 days to reach level 7 in the skill. Compass Carburetor smiled. With this, I would be able to heal from injuries and exhaustion even faster. This would further upgrade my training speed. This is just the first stop. He gazed out through the window, noticing the trees span past amid the darkness. I'll create numerous such sources of mental energy and quickly surpass whatever amount the slave harem system could obtain. It can only passively influence Regreal to take actions to cause situations where it could reap a lot of mental energy. But, I am actively doing that. And using my experience, I can create bigger situations. Let's see who's faster. Chapter 60. Trolling is part of my schemes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The token he had thrown towards the bandits was something he had created for his drama plans. For whatever reason, he wished to plant something in the minds of people so that they would relate it to him, connecting the two. This way, whenever they saw the token, they would link it to him, thinking of him. In such a way, the number of people who would be thinking about him would be beyond what he had actively influenced. While on Earth, he had come across an interesting theory that every temple, church, etc. was a token created in relevance to the deity the people worshipped. And, these tokens were meant to transmit their thoughts, their prayers to their deity of worship. Whether it was true or not, the idea had plausible substance to it, especially considering his situation. Moreover, every superhero comic too used the same to instill a psychological input in the minds of the populace. No matter who, a superhero had a defined logo they could be related with, a symbol they wore on their bodies. This was to instill in the minds of the populace that the symbol related to the respective hero, a form of connection to them, forming solace to their mental sanity. It was also the very reason every company had their unique logo. Just by seeing the logo, people would recognize a company. That was brand value, the value attached to the company that was recognized through the logo. After all, just by adding a tick mark to a shoe, its price could be dramatically increased and people wouldn't complain. It wasn't of value to the shoe, but rather to the logo on it. Such was the value symbols carried. And, every symbol had a distinct definition, one that sets them apart from others. As for Compass Carburetor, the logo he had created was a double C that was tangentially connected. It was a simple design, but one that he planned to instill in the minds of everyone he came across as a symbol to worship and fear. Having been at the forefront of the business world, he knew how to shape up and create new trends, rather greatly familiar with the process. So, he planned to do the same here and propagate his symbol into the masses. Beyond that, he wished to trigger the sheeple effect. Once the symbol gained traction among the populace, it would grow tremendously eventually. And, as the one connected to it and recognized by it, he would be obtaining all the mental energy associated with the token. It was another identity that he had planned to establish. And, he planned to lay down all the necessary groundwork in 2 months. Since he was traveling across the Heroica Empire from one end to another, he would be crossing numerous cities along the way. And, he planned to abuse the information network of the Heroica Empire. This way, no matter what Regreal's system had planned, it wouldn't be able to overtake him in mental energy influx at least for a couple of years. Compass Carburetor tucked his gun within his clothes, sensing it suck in the air as it began to condense a bullet, thinking, I haven't recharged it even once after arriving here. There won't be enough energy left to shoot bullets after 6 rounds. I should recharge it first tomorrow. He then thought of something, peeking out as he asked Grotak, startling the other party, is there any bandit hideouts along the way? There's one closer to the next city. We'll reach it a couple of hours before dawn. Even though he hesitated, Grotak relented in the end, truthfully saying everything, unwilling to trigger the scary entity before him. Alright, tell me once you reach there. Saying his piece, Compass Carburetor sat in silence, meditating as he began to train, increasing his Darlak reserves. Just as Grotak had said, they approached a silent patch of forest that had some open space. It was where another bandit group operated frequently. Since it was a couple of hours before dawn, there was no sign of activity in the place as all the bandits were fast asleep. There were only a couple of sentries placed on the lookout for any monsters or expedition forces sent by the cities to cull their numbers. Their hideout was located within a cave located high up on a hill. So, it was easy to defend and hard to attack. When the carriage stopped at a discreet location once it traveled past the bandit hideout, Compass Carburetor alighted, motioning for Fielta and Kaithai to remain seated. "It won't take much time." Saying so, he sprinted through the forest, lithe in his footsteps, gracefully skipping over any rocky protrusions by using his superior agility, strength, body flexibility, and motor senses. He aimed his gun at the two sentries, making a couple of shots. Both were headshots. As the gun didn't have any recoils, it was incredibly easy to aim. So, he never missed his targets. The two sentries dropped dead in their spots as Compass Carburetor scaled up the path, peeking into the cave as he took in the scenery inside. Upon noticing that no new mental energy stream landed on him from within the cave, it meant no one had noticed him. "But, I only have 4 more bullets left. After this, my gun doesn't even have sufficient energy to condense bullets. I have to make them count the most," he thought, inching his way through the cave as he tiptoed through the place, noticing the bandits sleeping on berths placed around the corner. Despite it being a cave-dwelling, the place was properly sanitized, causing him to understand, they are properly funded by some organization. Otherwise, this level of unity, organizational structure, quality of life, and the numerous armaments in their possession, they all point towards one fact. This is a criminal organization with immense foundation. Compass Carburetor thought, smiling as he couldn't help but grin with excitement, and, they make the perfect targets for my plan. Grinning, he made his way towards the interior, soon reaching the deepest part of the cave, looking at a man with a large body that was sleeping, huddling a woman in each arm, smiling contently. For some reason, the smiling face of the larger-built man nudged his sense of mischief as Compass Carburetor looked around, pulling out some strands from a piece of cloth as he rolled them into a wick, grinning wickedly as he approached the bed and gently inserted the wick into the man's nose, stirring it wildly.